You are listening to I Am Refocused Radio with your host, Shamaya Reed. This show is designed to inspire you to live your purpose and regain your focus. And now, here's your host, Shamaya Reed.
Hey, welcome to I Am Refocused Radio. We are here once again, and today we have another show aligned for y'all. Today we have an amazing special guest, John O'Brien. He has an amazing website, activatesuccess.org. And today's topic is a special topic. We're going to talk about become a better leader. That's something we all can do. But first and foremost, I want to welcome you, John, to the show. Say, how you doing, man?
Oh, good. How are you? Thanks so much for having me.
Before we dive into today's topic, kind of give us a background of yourself.
Okay. So I'm a Ph.D. trained counseling psychologist. So that's my background. And I've worked for many years in the field of mental health. The last several years, I've built on that work to apply practical psychology skills to the work environment. So I've gotten trained as an executive coach and a health and wellness coach. And my specialty area specifically is about executive wellness, which is kind of broadly defined, meaning both wellness for the leader as an individual, but also how that provides a foundation for then creating wellness within the organization. So that's a little bit about me and my work.
When you decided to launch Activate Success, your website, your organization, what was the key point where it's like, you know what, this is something that's in need that I can do for a community? What inspired you to go ahead and take that step?
Yeah, that's a great question. So, sort of two things. One is that I had personal experience with an executive who unfortunately didn't do the greatest job of paying attention to self-care. My dad, who growing up, he was in a very stressful work environment and ultimately had a major heart attack at the age of 49, where he was not able to work after that and died very young. So growing up, I saw in him the effects of really significant workplace stress that was, not well managed and that was overwhelming. So that's sort of what prompted me to go into the field of psychology, I think, and to try to help people, manage their stress and their symptoms differently. But I think more recently, building on that, it was, working in one-to-one psychotherapy with many people in business and leaders and recognizing the stresses that they were under and how you can only do so much with individuals, that I wanted to try to apply these same principles to leaders. And then also more broadly, I work with teams to sort of make hopefully more of an impact on the organization, because you can change an individual, but if the organization doesn't change, it's probably not going to help the individual in the longer term.
And with your organization, Activate Success, you have multiple services that you provide. If you don't mind, share the audience some of the different services and what they all entail.
Sure. Okay. Yeah, happily. So people can find me at activatesuccess.org. So I provide both one-to-one coaching as well as team coaching. That both, sometimes, one-to-one is what works best, and sometimes there are ways in which a team wants to function more effectively. Or, unfortunately, sometimes it's also that a team has had some significant problems in the dynamics within their group. And so I've been brought in to try to help to sort through those dynamics and help people kind of reframe things and move forward. I do work doing leadership assessments. I'm a big lover of data. So I really feel like that science-based assessments can provide people with a great deal of information about themselves and about where their strengths and areas of challenge may be. So I do that work. Finally, I also do a lot of speaking, both trainings as well as keynote addresses on topics related to a wide variety of things for the workplace, but to include things like emotional intelligence, leadership effectiveness, and incivility.
And speaking of emotional intelligence, for someone who may not be aware of that terminology, explain to the audience, what does that mean and how do we get better at that?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So emotional intelligence has to do with the ability to kind of perceive, interpret, evaluate, and use emotions to both kind of communicate with and relate to other people effectively. And it's got four key components to it. The first is self-awareness. That's kind of the foundation that nothing else is going to really matter if we don't have the ability to be aware of ourselves, both internally as well as the impact we have on others. So that's one kind of pillar. Building on that is the idea of self-management, which is being able to regulate our reactivity in situations and to act, not react, and learning how to do that. The third area is social awareness, or really could just briefly be described as empathy, being able to put yourself in someone else's shoes and see things from their perspective, even if it's not the way that you see things. And that's, I think, important for leaders. And then finally, relationship management, which is about, once you're aware of yourself, you've regulated yourself, you have some empathy for what your team or colleagues might be going through. It's to figure out how to effectively lead them or how to effectively manage some of the challenges that they're facing. So those are the kind of the four key components of emotional intelligence. And I would just also add that there are some authors who say that for someone to be an effective business leader, the concept of emotional intelligence and developing skills around emotional intelligence, or what's called EQ, is, if not equally important or more important than IQ, or kind of intellectual intelligence. So there's a lot that's been written, and if any members of your audience have not heard about emotional intelligence, I would encourage them to go examine some of the books by, for example, Daniel Goleman, or if they Google emotional intelligence, they can find out some useful information.
Once again, listening to Refocus Radio, talking to our guest, John O'Brien. He is a Ph.D. level trained counseling psychologist, by the way. You attended the Society of Counseling Psychology, APA Division 17. How important is for someone with your level to have that such of educational background?
Well, I mean, I first do want to say that I think, each of us brings to a situation our own life experiences. So, that I always like to say that there's, education is useful, but in addition, people can get life experience a variety of ways. So I say that by way of introduction, just to say that, I have this background, but that doesn't mean that I feel like I'm better than other people. I just have this experience to draw on. But, we draw on a variety of things. But I do think that to be advising people about psychological principles, I do think it's important to have the depth of knowledge to draw upon. That depending upon what someone is dealing with in a work environment, how deep that knowledge needs to be is going to vary. So I'm not saying that you you have to hire me. Well, maybe I should say that. No, it's not saying someone has to have this depth of knowledge. But I think, especially when it comes to more complicated situations or to remedial coaching for someone that's really had significant problems in the workplace, I think you probably want to try to seek out someone who has a depth of skills around the specific, problem that someone's dealing with.
Exactly. And that's what I'm getting at. You are very well rounded with your education and your life experience. And when you're coaching for executive wellness and you're helping your clients, do you have an example of someone who really gave you some great feedback on just basically the results of working with you?
Sure. So I'm thinking of one person in particular that I worked with who was and is still an executive who was highly successful in the actual work, but in his personal life was coping in significantly unhealthy ways that would lead him to not take enough breaks during the day. He was just working all the time. His sleep was really dysregulated. He was really sleep deprived. At times would be drinking too much alcohol, not to a level that was diagnosable as a problem, but nonetheless was still a problem. People can have problems with alcohol even if it's not kind of doesn't rise to that level. So through our work together and through careful assessment, we were able to build first on his strengths as a leader and help to identify through some data what his strengths were, and they were many. But then also to see that he was very good at attending to the needs of other people, but not his own. And that's part of what had brought him to coaching, was really recognizing his need for greater balance in his life and more wellness. And so that was really the focus of our work, very intensely for a period of time. And he was successful in learning how to say no when possible to demands, and learning how to structure his day to allow more time for family and sleep, which is very important. That's something that I often see leaders shortchanging themselves on. And certainly grew in his awareness of the use of alcohol, which is very much interwoven in many work environments, that some heavier use of alcohol becomes the norm. And he was able to have a different relationship with alcohol, where it didn't require him to stop, or again, it wasn't rising to the level of an addiction, but it was just so much so that it was interfering in his life. So that, I think, was very useful guidance for him. And in fact, this is someone I still see now on a much less frequent basis, but to provide ongoing support.
We're talking to John O'Brien here on Refocus Radio. When you are helping people create those strategies, right, to help them move forward and have tangible actions to follow up with those principles, how does the system look like when you're helping an individual? I'm sure you customize everything from scratch with the client, but are there some fundamental pieces to that system for the client?
Yeah. Well, I think understanding where people are at when they come to coaching. I mean, part of that is what the reason is for coaching. Most people who come to me willingly and interested in working on themselves and working on change. I have also had the experience of working with people who are sent to me for remedial coaching because of some problem in the work environment. Those situations can be a little bit trickier, because sometimes people come to those meetings with some amount of shame, or maybe anger and resentment about the fact that they've been sent for coaching. And so that it's a different kind of beginning, whether someone's coming willingly or being sent to me. But in both instances, I try to provide people with a supportive environment and encourage those people who've been, quote, forced to send to me, being forced to see me, that this is still an opportunity, I hope, for them to learn and grow. So, my coaching always begins with some form of assessment, and that depends upon the type of work I may be doing with someone. That may be a questionnaire that they complete. I usually do that with everybody who I coach. But then in some instances, it also incorporates the use of kind of scientifically grounded measures like the Hogan assessment. So that having done that, we then look at all the information. We might also do, depending upon what level the leader is at, maybe they have team members who report to them and colleagues. And so sometimes a 360 assessment is beneficial to get kind of anonymous feedback to them about what their strengths are according to colleagues and direct reports, and what they can work on. Then looking at all that data, we try to come up with picking maybe 2 or 3 things perhaps that they want to work on, and then break those down. I mean, what the overarching goal is, but then very clear, specific objectives about what is it specifically they want to see. What describable behavior change do they want to see in themselves? Because if you don't really have that, it's then hard to measure if coaching is going to be effective. So that would be the way that I would proceed to with a client to kind of structure things around goals.
Once again, you listen to Omni Focus Radio, talking to our guest, John O'Brien, and you go to his website, activatesuccess.org. When it comes to today's topic that we're exploring, become a better leader, leads up to this question. When it comes to stress management, what are some different kinds of stresses that people have to deal with and that you have recognized working with clients?
Let's see. Well, I think that there are the demands that people face these days of needing to do more with less, whether that's less resources, specifically fewer people. Um, many businesses that I go into personally, you can just see that they're shorthanded for a variety of reasons. And so I think that's creating significant stress for, employees, frontline workers, especially, and then also for customers who, when we're customers, we're not always patient. I try to be patient myself, but people are not always patient. And so I think that the frustrations people feel around not having to do more with less and not having enough resources, whether that's personnel or money to run the business. So there's that. There's kind of the logistics of running the business that can be difficult. Then there's the interpersonal environment that people are in, and I say to everybody that I work with, I've said it through the pandemic, and I even still say it now, that, no one is functioning at their best.
Yeah.
I always like to throw in the caveat, except for me. Of course, I'm functioning perfectly. No, not me too. Me too. I'll admit that. Nobody's functioning at their best right now. And there's a lot of pent-up frustration and anger in our culture.
Yeah.
And so people are out there kind of dumping their bags of anger, figuratively speaking, on others in a wide variety of contexts.
That's the key.
I'm sorry?
So they've been holding on to it for a while too. So the wrong person comes along and boom.
Yes. And maybe it's not even the wrong person. It's just the next person who comes along and says, hi. and that, they become the target for the person. So there's a lot of anger, I think, out there that people are dealing with. And I guess the last thing I would say too is that, in the pandemic, we were all, in lockdown, and, many of us ate too much, drank too much, didn't exercise enough. The average American put on, do you want to guess how many pounds the average American put on during the pandemic?
Maybe 40.
Well, very good. So it was 29 pounds.
Oh, wow.
The average woman put on 22 pounds, and the average man put on, I think it was 37 pounds. So we put on a lot of weight. People were drinking. If alcohol sales were up 40%. So now, as things kind of rebalance, people have to try to unlearn those unhealthy behaviors. So those are the stresses that I see most prominently.
Listen to Omni Focus Radio, talking to our guest, John O'Brien. You can go to his website, activatesuccess.org. Now, when someone listens to this podcast and they're like, okay, this is awesome stuff, but what can I do when I take my headphones off? What's some of the basic things I can do right now, even before I visit John?
Great question. Well, I think I would encourage people to first, think about some of the concepts that we're talking about on this podcast today, and kind of take an opportunity to sit down. It's hard to find time often for people, but maybe try to think about this when they're commuting um, on, public transportation, or, maybe when they're driving, as long as they can do that and drive safely. But just to take a minute to reflect on, okay, do they consider their areas of strength? What's going well in their life? And what are their areas of challenge?
That's good.
Or, what are the areas of their lives that maybe people need to think about? Okay, this has gotten out of balance. So that, I think, would be the first thing that I'd suggest, is just try to do a good amount of self-assessment. And then, whether or not someone, wants to come visit me, which I'd be happy to have. But in addition, I would suggest, think about, sometimes, especially as we're coming up upon the new year, when people think about behavior change around New Year's and New Year's resolutions, um, people often set unrealistically high goals for themselves,
Mhm.
and then end up not being able to meet them, and then feeling badly about themselves, and sort of shoving that away for another year until New Year's comes again. So I would encourage people, if you recognize the areas of challenge that you have, start by just focusing on one thing, focus only on one thing. And, let's take the example of people, New Year's resolution, I'm going to exercise. And so often in the clients, people I work with, they'll say, I'm going to go to the gym, I'm going to go 5 days a week. Um, and then on weekends, I'm going to, do whatever else. Well, I mean, that they're going from not going to the gym at all to now all of a sudden they're going to go 5 or 6 days a week. Well, that's just not realistic. So I encourage people, okay, think about it realistically. Maybe you want to get to 5 days a week, but maybe start with, in the next 2 weeks, I'm going to go join the gym. Uh, and then maybe that's what you do, maybe that goal. Or I'm going to go to the gym and join. And then I'm going to go at least once, in the next 2 week period. And maybe then people will be able to achieve more, but start your goals very small and build from there. Change is hard. Be patient.
Oh, that's the phrase for the day.
Absolutely.
Change
Yeah,
is hard. Be
it
patient.
sure
I
is.
like that.
Yeah. Yeah.
And another thing, before we let you go, there's resources that you have on your website, and there's a video that people can watch. Is about 4-step mindfulness. If you could give us a little teaser of what that video is all about.
Absolutely, sure. So I do plan to, if people want to go to my website, I do plan to sort of build out some other resources that people will be able to access for free. I'm going to do another video pretty soon. These are like 5-minute skills, and I'm going to do one on the power of abdominal breathing and how to use that. So I'm putting a teaser in for that too. But
Mhm.
the 4-step mindfulness is a strategy that people can use. If we think about mindfulness, it's awareness of the internal world of our thoughts and feelings, and the outer world of actions and perception. So it's an internal and external awareness. And so this 4-step mindfulness is a strategy that people can use to regulate their behavior in situations by, when they recognize that they've been triggered into a negative emotion, how can they first stop themselves, and identify, this feeling I'm having or this situation I'm in has been problematic for me. So let's stop. That's the first step. Breathe, which, just simply means, when possible, just take a few slow, deep breaths. It doesn't mean you have to go off for 5 minutes and do all kinds of abdominal breathing, but just take a couple of breaths to settle yourself, and then reflect. Probably this type of situation is something that you have recognized has been problematic. Maybe you have a difficult employee, for example, that just when that person is around you, you just get irritated. So stop, breathe, reflect on, okay, this is a person who irritates me. How have I responded in the past in ways that weren't effective? What do I really want to be doing differently? Reflect on the situation, what you've done in the past, what you want to do in the future, and then choose. That's the last stage, which is really about recognizing that you have the potential to act, not react in situations. And so if you can choose to engage skillfully with behaviors and how you can change your behaviors to stop, breathe, reflect, and choose. And again, people can hear me talk a little bit more about that in the video. That can provide a real foundation for people being able to implement behavior change.
And I will say to that, that's the keys to activate success. Because, like you said, I like the part of reflect and choose.
Yeah.
Because sometimes we don't reflect. We just, like you said, we just react to the situation.
Exactly.
And I have people on the show who said some amazing points about, think of it this way. There's much more life beyond this temporary problem.
Yep.
The problem is we stay with the problem as if it can't be fixed.
Right, absolutely. Or we make the problem way more than it is.
Exactly.
In like 2 weeks or 2 months or 2 years, are we really going to remember this situation? And the answer is probably not.
Once again, listen, I'm Refocus Radio, talking to our guest, John O'Brien. If you're ready to take action today, go visit his website after the show, activatesuccess.org. Tons of content. There's blogs. He's going to have more additional resources pretty soon, but he has a video you can watch. He has a lot of things you can tap into right before you decide to work with him. Call to action. Someone listening right now and they're ready to work with you. What's the next step?
The next step would be to go to my website. You can, again, activatesuccess.org. You'll see there's a link in there for if you want to contact me to get a free consultation about your interest in coaching. There's also another button for, again, anybody who may be interested in having me speak to a group. So, and I guess what I would also suggest is, I'd be happy to work with any and all who may wish to come see me, and we can talk about whether I'm the right person. But I would also say and encourage people to think about what it is that they want in through coaching, what they want to develop, and think about what type of coach is going to be most effective for them to accomplish their goals. And that may be me, that may be someone else. But again, I'm certainly happy to have people contact me to see if it would be possible for me to be of help to them.
Become a better leader. Talking to our guest, John O'Brien. Go visit his website. Don't wait. All right. Don't put off, tomorrow or next year. Do it today. ActivateSuccess.org. Get ready to activate your own success. I want to say thank you, John O'Brien, for taking time in your schedule to talk to Refocus Radio.